Dawn, April 25, 1915. The sea off the Gallipoli Peninsula is almost flat. Not calm, just undecided. Gray light spreads slowly across the water as transport ships sit motionless, their hulls dark against the horizon. Small boats bob in their shadows, packed with men who have been awake for hours, rifles between their knees, orders folded in their pockets. This is supposed to be the easy part. From offshore, the cliffs look steep but quiet. No visible movement, no artillery fire, no wall of resistance announcing itself. For months, planners in London and Cairo have convinced themselves that the Ottoman Empire is brittle, overstretched, outdated, unprepared for a modern amphibious assault. Inside the Allied command structure, Gallipoli is framed as opportunity, a way to force the Dardanelles, a way to knock the Ottomans out of the war, a way to reopen supply lines to Russia, and for some, a way to salvage momentum after months of stalemate in Europe. On paper, it is decisive. On the water, it is quiet. The landings begin in fragments. At several beaches, troops step into shallow surf and push forward with little immediate opposition. Shots are fired, but sporadically. Ottoman defenders are present, but thin, uncoordinated, local. Officers on the ground sense it immediately. Resistance exists, but it is not organized yet. This is the window. The terrain inland is harsh, ridges, gullies, scrub. But it is not yet controlled. High ground looms above the beaches, undefended for the moment, its value obvious to anyone who has ever studied a map. Junior officers urge movement. Platoons advance cautiously, then pause, unsure whether to press on without explicit orders. Units lose cohesion in the unfamiliar terrain, but not morale. There is no rout, no panic. Only confusion mixed with possibility. The danger is not enemy fire, it is hesitation. Offshore, aboard command ships, reports arrive unevenly. Some beaches report progress. Others report confusion. None report catastrophe. This creates a paradox inside the command structure. Nothing is going badly enough to force action. Aboard the flagship, senior commanders study charts and dispatches, trying to assemble a coherent picture from fragments arriving out of sequence. There is no single enemy force to react against, only uncertainty. Are these landings meeting serious resistance or only screening forces? Are Ottoman reserves nearby or still assembling inland? Is the apparent weakness real or a trap? No one wants to commit reserves prematurely. No one wants to order a push that might walk troops into unseen fire. The memory of previous amphibious failures looms heavily. The fear of escalation without control shapes every discussion. Restraint feels responsible. And responsibility in war is seductive. On the beaches, the situation begins to change. Ottoman commanders, initially caught off balance, start reacting with speed that planners underestimated. Small units move uphill. Defensive positions take shape along ridgelines. Machine guns appear where minutes earlier there had been nothing. The window does not slam shut. It narrows. Messages from the shore grow more urgent, but not desperate. They describe opportunity slipping, not disaster unfolding. That distinction matters at higher command levels. Urgency without catastrophe is easy to delay. Field commanders request permission to advance further inland, to seize high ground before resistance consolidates. They emphasize momentum, initiative, the fragility of the enemy response. The replies are cautious. Hold position. Consolidate. Await further coordination. The order is not framed as refusal. It is framed as prudence. Somewhere between decks and maps, a decision culture asserts itself. The Allied command structure is designed to prevent recklessness. It rewards confirmation, synchronization, and centralized control. Initiative is valued, but only within defined boundaries. Gallipoli is testing that system in an unfamiliar way. The situation does not demand a dramatic choice yet. It demands judgment in uncertainty. And uncertainty is where systems tend to freeze. No one says, "Stop advancing," but no one says, "Go now." And in war, silence functions like an order. By mid-morning, the contrast becomes stark. Troops who landed early and paused now find movement harder. Ottoman units have reinforced key positions. Fire becomes heavier. Paths once open are now covered. The same terrain that looked manageable at dawn now feels hostile. Officers on the ground understand the shift instinctively. They can feel the battle settling into shape, and they know it is the wrong shape. What was fluid is becoming fixed. They report again. They stress timing. They warn that delay is changing the fight itself. Above them, command debates language. Is this resistance temporary? Is this the main Ottoman response, or only a local reaction? Should reserves be committed now, or held for a clearer picture? The logic of caution compounds. Every minute spent waiting increases the perceived cost of acting. By afternoon, the landings have not failed. That is the problem. They have also not succeeded. The beaches are held. Men dig in where they stand. Casualties mount slowly, not catastrophically. Enough to justify caution. Not enough to force urgency. The opportunity that existed at dawn, unwritten, unofficial, fragile, has begun to fade. No decisive order has been given. No dramatic mistake has been made. But something essential has shifted. Initiative is no longer assumed. It must now be regained. And history rarely forgives armies that pause at the exact moment when speed mattered most. The delay has not yet become disaster, but it has become structure. And structure, once formed under fire, is brutally hard to undo. Midday settles uneasily over Gallipoli. The gunfire has become regular now, not intense enough to signal collapse, not light enough to suggest freedom of movement. Smoke drifts lazily across the slopes. On the beaches, men adjust positions they never planned to hold for long. Rifles are stacked. Shovels come out. This is not what the landing phase was meant to look like. Inside, forward headquarters carved into sand and scrub, officers stand over maps already smudged with dirt and sweat. The lines drawn that morning, arrows pushing confidently inland, are still there, but they no longer describe reality. Units are not where the plan said they would be. They are where they stopped. No one calls it a stalemate. Not yet. Reports from the front become sharper in tone. Ottoman resistance is increasing, not dramatically but deliberately. Small unit counterattacks probe Allied positions. Machine gun fire pins movement through gullies that were assumed passable. Snipers appear along ridgelines that should have been secured hours ago. The enemy is learning. And learning faster than expected. Junior commanders repeat the same message in different words. If they do not move now, they will have to fight for ground that was once free. Momentum, once lost, cannot be requested back through channels. But momentum is not a line item in reports. Casualties are still manageable. Ammunition is sufficient. Communications, while imperfect, are functioning. There is no single data point screaming emergency. From higher command's perspective, the situation is ambiguous, not dire. Ambiguity invites deliberation. Aboard Allied command ships, senior officers struggle with a widening gap between tactical reality and strategic fear. They are haunted by two possibilities. If they push too hard and encounter a concentrated Ottoman counterattack, they risk chaos, fragmentation, and unnecessary loss. If they wait too long, they risk allowing the enemy to shape the battlefield permanently. Both risks are real, but only one is visible. What they can see are fragmented units, difficult terrain, imperfect coordination. What they cannot see, yet, is how quickly delay is reorganizing the enemy. Caution feels like control, and control is comforting. On shore, the consequences of delay become physical. Paths that were briefly open are now under fire. Officers who scouted routes earlier in the day report they are no longer usable. The terrain has not changed, but its ownership has. Ottoman reinforcements move inland using interior lines the Allies underestimated. They are not massing spectacularly. They are entrenching intelligently. Every hour spent holding positions turns temporary pauses into permanent fronts. Field commanders request renewed authorization to advance. Even limited localized pushes to seize key heights before nightfall. The requests are debated, then softened, then delayed. The language of command shifts subtly. Advance becomes maintain pressure. Movement becomes improve positions. Opportunity becomes risk. Words begin to work against action. In London and Cairo, the campaign is still discussed in strategic abstractions. Gallipoli is a theater, a tool, a lever to move larger outcomes. The landing reports arriving are incomplete, but not alarming enough to challenge the core belief that the Ottomans cannot sustain a serious defense. That belief has not yet been disproven, and so it remains intact. No one wants to be the first to admit that the plan's assumptions might be wrong, not because pride is at stake, but because altering assumptions mid-operation threatens coherence itself. Systems prefer consistency over correctness. By evening, the fracture becomes visible. Allied units are holding, but not advancing. Ottoman units are reinforcing, but not breaking through. The battle is solidifying into a shape neither side initially intended. This is the danger zone of war, where the future is still undecided, but the past has already limited the options. Commanders begin planning defensively, not because they have chosen to, but because offensive planning now requires more resources, more coordination, more certainty than earlier in the day. Delay has increased the cost of action, and higher cost makes action less likely. The shock does not come as a sudden attack. It comes as a realization. Night falls, and the high ground remains out of Allied hands. What could have been seized with speed will now require assault. What could have been bypassed will now have to be reduced. The landing has transitioned, quietly, almost politely, from an operation of movement into a battle of position. No order announced this change. It simply happened. In the darkness, both sides dig. The Ottomans fortify ridges that should never have been contested. The Allies entrench on beaches they never planned to defend for more than hours. The pause, once framed as caution, has reshaped the campaign. Still, no one says the word failure. The landings are intact. The men are ashore. The operation technically continues. But the character of the war here has changed. Gallipoli is no longer a race inland. It is becoming a test of endurance. And endurance was never the Allied advantage. Dawn breaks unevenly over Gallipoli. The light reveals what the darkness concealed. Lines that have settled, positions that have hardened, intentions that have quietly narrowed. The beaches are no longer staging grounds, they are defensive perimeters. Inside Allied headquarters, the mood is restrained, almost procedural. The chaos many feared did not arrive overnight. Units did not collapse. The Ottomans did not counterattack in force. On paper, that looks like success. But calm in war is often misread, because calm can mean balance, and balance, at this moment, favors the defender. Maps are laid out again. The same ridges, the same gullies, the same objectives, now annotated with fresh casualty figures and amended timelines. What was once advance immediately is now advance deliberately. The shift sounds minor. It isn't. Reports from the front repeat a troubling pattern. Every attempt to move inland now encounters organized resistance. Not overwhelming, but positioned. Machine guns placed with intent. Artillery firing with pre-registered accuracy. The Ottomans have not merely arrived, they have settled in. Field commanders speak more bluntly now. They warn that delay has allowed the enemy to seize commanding ground, that further waiting will only compound the problem. But bluntness travels poorly up command chains built for reassurance. Senior officers see a different risk profile. Casualties are rising, but not catastrophically. Communications remain intact. The force is still cohesive. From their vantage point, the situation appears salvageable. This is the most dangerous assessment in war. Not because it is wrong, but because it postpones commitment. Aboard the command ships, the debate crystallizes. Two paths remain: push forward now, accepting heavy losses to regain initiative before the Ottomans fully consolidate. Or pause again, bring up artillery, improve supply, coordinate more carefully, reducing immediate risk while conceding time. Both paths are costly, only one is irreversible. The question is not whether men will die, it is whether they will die advancing, or later, defending ground that was never meant to be held. The silence stretches. Silence, here, is not uncertainty, it is calculation. The order is issued. There will be no immediate general advance inland. Units are instructed to consolidate positions. Artillery will be brought ashore. Preparations will be made for a more deliberate offensive at a later time. This is framed as prudence, as professionalism, as restraint in the face of uncertainty. But everyone present understands what this truly means. The window for exploiting surprise has closed. The campaign has crossed an invisible threshold. From this moment forward, Gallipoli will not be decided by speed. It will be decided by attrition. And attrition favors the defender, especially one fighting on familiar ground, with shorter supply lines and a clear sense of purpose. The decision cannot be undone. You cannot pause surprise and resume it later. The shock does not arrive with gunfire. It arrives with Ottoman activity. Within days, enemy trenches deepen, artillery positions multiply, supply routes solidify. Defensive networks interlock across terrain the Allies had once hoped to bypass entirely. The Ottomans are no longer reacting, they are planning. When Allied probes resume, they are met not by confusion, but by fire. The cost of movement has multiplied. Every meter now requires blood. What might have been seized with momentum now demands sacrifice. And sacrifice, once demanded, becomes policy. In headquarters, the language changes permanently. No one speaks of rapid victory anymore. They speak of phases, of endurance, of holding until something else breaks. The order to wait, intended to reduce risk, has locked the campaign into its most dangerous form. Gallipoli is no longer an operation designed to unbalance the enemy. It has become a siege without walls, and sieges consume armies slowly, methodically, without drama. The decision is made, not to fail, but to continue under conditions that guarantee the cost will be far higher than anyone intended. The disaster is no longer a possibility, it is a trajectory. By mid-morning, the soundscape of Gallipoli has changed. Not louder, denser. Artillery no longer fires in bursts, it fires in patterns. Rifle shots no longer surprise anyone. They form a constant background noise, like wind through rock. The front has stopped moving. Inside Allied command spaces, maps begin to look crowded. Not with arrows, but with notes. casualty tallies, ammunition estimates, requests marked urgent but delivered without urgency. This is what a stalled campaign looks like at first. Orderly, manageable, deceptively stable. The consequences of delay compound quietly. Ottoman units rotate through the front with increasing efficiency. New trenches appear overnight. Firing positions improve. Fields of fire overlap. What the Allies face now is not resistance. It is structure. Attempts to push forward require coordination that no longer exists. Units that landed together are now separated by terrain and attrition. Communication lines stretch thin across gullies and exposed ridgelines. Every local commander asks the same question. Where is the breakthrough supposed to come from? No one answers directly, because the truth is uncomfortable. There is no breakthrough planned anymore, only persistence. Medical stations begin to overflow. Wounded men arrive faster than evacuation can handle. Not from sweeping offensives, but from incremental moves that achieve little ground. A few meters gained. A trench taken. A hill approached, but not held. The arithmetic becomes brutal. Casualties are no longer tied to progress. They are tied to maintenance, the cost of staying where they are. This is the moment when officers begin to understand that delay has not avoided risk. It has redistributed it across time, turning a sharp danger into a grinding one. Commanders at higher levels still believe adjustment is possible. More artillery, better coordination, a renewed push once conditions are right. But conditions never become right, because the enemy now controls when and where violence escalates. Ottoman counterattacks are limited, precise, and timed. They do not seek dramatic victory, they seek exhaustion. Every Allied attempt to reorganize triggers pressure elsewhere. The campaign is no longer being directed. It is being absorbed by the terrain. The shock arrives when numbers are compiled. Casualty reports, once viewed individually, are totaled. The losses rival what would have been expected from a decisive push, but without decisive results. Men are dying in numbers that suggest a major offensive. Yet no offensive is underway. This realization spreads unevenly, but once it lands, it cannot be unseen. The delay has not preserved the force. It has bled it slowly, without leverage. The cost of waiting is now measurable and irreversible. Conversations shift again, not about how to advance, but whether advancing still makes sense. Withdrawal is whispered, then silenced. Commitment has replaced strategy. The decision to wait, made to avoid catastrophe, has created a different kind of disaster, one without a single moment to blame. One that unfolds quietly, day by day, trench by trench. Gallipoli has crossed its final threshold. It is no longer an operation seeking advantage. It is a campaign trapped by its own caution, consuming men to justify the decision not to move when movement still mattered. The collapse is not dramatic, it is procedural, and by the time it is acknowledged, there is nothing left to reverse. Only losses to account for. Months later, Gallipoli is quiet in a way no battlefield ever intends to be. The guns have not fallen silent because peace has arrived, but because decision has. The campaign no longer asks what might still be achieved, only what can be removed without collapse. On the beaches, the terrain looks unchanged. The ridgelines are still sharp. The gullies still unforgiving. The sea still indifferent. What has changed is purpose. Inside Allied headquarters, discussions no longer revolve around victory. They revolve around extraction. Timetables are rewritten, not to advance, but to leave without triggering disaster. The operation that began with ambition ends with logistics. Withdrawal planning exposes the final cost of delay. Positions once taken easily now require careful abandonment. Every trench must be vacated without alerting the enemy. Every movement must be masked. Every mistake risks turning retreat into rout. Ironically, this is the moment when Allied command displays its greatest coordination. The evacuation succeeds, not because the campaign worked, but because the enemy expects nothing bold anymore. Men who survived months of indecision leave quietly at night, carrying equipment that feels heavier than when they arrived. Not because it weighs more, but because it represents effort that led nowhere. The shock does not arrive on the peninsula. It arrives later, in reports, in Parliament, in headlines that search for causes simple enough to explain failure without implicating the system itself. Gallipoli becomes framed as inevitability. Bad terrain, strong enemy, impossible conditions. But among professionals, a different understanding circulates, spoken carefully, if at all. The campaign did not fail because it advanced too far. It failed because it stopped moving when movement still mattered. The order to wait, issued to reduce risk, created a situation where risk could no longer be avoided, only prolonged. Gallipoli lingers, not as a single mistake, but as a pattern, a lesson commanders rarely like to teach openly, that restraint, when driven by uncertainty rather than judgment, can be as destructive as recklessness. The men who fought there carry the cost quietly. So do the institutions that study the campaign and quietly adjust doctrine, emphasizing initiative, tempo, and the danger of pauses that hand control to the enemy. Gallipoli is remembered for courage, but its turning point was administrative. A delay, an order meant to buy time. Time that, once surrendered, never came back. Wars are often decided not by the wrong decision, but by the decision made too late. And when that happens, history does not record the pause. It records the consequences.